Hi, Newport residents and folks from the surrounding communities. I'm Rick Ufford Chase, Mayor of Newport, and this is Newport Notes with Rick. And this session is going to be entirely about numbers and the work that our two special task forces have been doing. So if that stuff bores you, you can check out, but I hope you'll stick around because the task forces have been doing important work, and I think it's important for all of us to be well informed. So I want to just give a little bit of background about why the task forces were created. If you've been watching these sessions that I've been doing, you've already heard this, but I'll just repeat because I think it's helpful to keep it in mind. That the current council is wrestling with some pretty large problems that have been in the making for many years. There's no one person and no one moment in my judgment that we can point to say this is where the problem came from. There are a variety of things, some of our own making and some that weren't of our own making, that have contributed to the situation that we're in today. But the situation that we find ourselves in right now is that we've been running a deficit budget on the water and sewer budget. That's called an enterprise fund because it functions like a business. Basically, it's supposed to bring in as much money as it spends every year. But we've been running a deficit in that fund that has run to as high as $500,000 some years for the last 7 or 8 years in a row. And that money has, the deficit, the accumulated deficit, has eaten away the cash reserve that the city had at one time of well over $1.5 million. And it has eaten into our ability to put money aside for future expenditures on big ticket items like a new Vector truck that does the pumping out of the ditches when our staff are working to manage problems with the sewer, or new maintenance on water pipes, or those kinds of things. So as a result, we have a cash flow challenge that we're trying to respond to right now. I want to make clear to the community that while the cash flow problem is serious and needs to be dealt with responsibly, it is not a crisis. The city is not challenged by bankruptcy. We have way more assets than we have obligations at this point. We just need to be responsible about making sure that we are charging our customers enough to make the payments on our expenses throughout the year on that water and sewer budget. Not unlike the same challenges we have with the operations budget, which is paid for by property taxes. So the first 2 weeks of our new term, since we were elected, the mayor and council were elected in early March, we spent the first week and a half roughly developing a plan to create 2 task forces. One task force is called Water and Sewer, and it's being chaired by Councilmember John Manette. The second task force is called Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices. It's being chaired by Councilmember Carter Finnegan. And we put out a call to the community to serve on those task forces, and I was deeply gratified by the response that we got. We got some people who are concerned and smart citizens, some of whom actually bring a significant amount of experience to the table in each of these areas, and I'll say their names later on. So last night we had a special council meeting in which those 2 task forces made their first set of recommendations to the council, and the council took action on them. We were under a time crunch because if we want to address the income, which is to say the rates for water and sewer for the fiscal year 25-26, that's our fiscal year that begins the 1st of July and runs through the 30th of June. If we want to tinker with those rates and adjust them appropriately, we have to make those decisions by the day that I'm filming this, May 1st, in order for those, that will change the rates for the current quarter that we're in through the end of this fiscal year, which will be billed the end of August for payment in September. So the problem that we had is that we had to make sure that we were addressing the rate challenges in a timely fashion so that we didn't get so far into the new fiscal year that any adjustment we would do would be negligible in its impact on the deficit. So the Water and Sewer Task Force has met more than weekly. In fact, the last week I think they met 3 times. They've put in countless hours on spreadsheets, and they've gone very deep into what's going on. And they came back with what they call Phase 1 recommendations. And those recommendations are to do a short-term, immediate fix of our rates and adjust them up so that we can be confident that in our fiscal year 25-26, we will have a balanced budget with water and sewer. So I know people are waiting with bated breath. Those recommendations last night that were passed by the council were to go back to November of last year, when the last rate increase took place, in a way that skewed the rates. If you were non-metered on the sewer side, you took a far bigger hit than if you had meters on the sewer side. And so some folks had a much larger increase last fall if they were not metered than other folks had. We can talk about water meters another day. That's another challenge that we're going to have to take on in Phase 2. But basically what the Water and Sewer team recommended to the council was that we go back and address the inequity of that set of rates that we created back in November, and start at an 8% increase that took place in water and match it with an 8% increase in sewer. So that means it will not change the rates that folks have paid over the last several months, but the new rates that are being instituted begin from a place of equitability. They're beginning from the same spot, and the water rates will be 27% higher than they were. Those rates were set back in November. And the sewer rates will be 36% higher than they were than they would have been if they had been established evenly back in November. So in fact, this time around, the folks who are not metered will see less of an overall impact, particularly on the sewer side of the ledger, than others will. So the question is, why did we need a 27% increase in water rates and a 36% increase in sewer rates? And the answer is because that's what it currently costs to run the system, to provide clean water and sewer for the city of Newport. There are we've done a comparison with other communities across the state, and our rates have been consistently far lower than most other communities across the state when it comes to both water and sewer. This will bring us up into an area that is much more kind of in the middle of the pack with what other cities set, though I should be clear, that's not how we made decisions about what the rates would be. The rate decisions were made on 2 things. 1, what will it cost to run the program? And 2, what is the formula necessary in order to make sure that we are meeting our obligations as commissioners of the water system? That's what all of us are functioning as on the council when we make these decisions. We have an obligation by charter that we will create a balanced budget. So that will be challenging news, and there's more thinking that's going into how we can support folks through this challenging time when those rates hit. You will see those changes in your bill that will be due in September. So that takes you through the first Phase 1 recommendations from water and sewer. But before they actually got to set the rates, one of the things we had to do was to actually review and pass the water and sewer budget. That was not done back when we were looking at the operations budget this year. And there has not been a practice consistently over time of the council actually reviewing that budget and approving it. But this council has determined that it is in everyone's best interest for the council to be fully invested in this process and to understand the implications of the budget. And therefore, the council reviewed a budget that was put in front of us last night by the water and sewer team. So the budget that was provided in the annual report this year has been modified in 3 significant ways before the council approved it last night. The first is that the budget included some specific items that we know we're going to have to purchase in the next few years, and there's been a practice of trying to set money aside to save for those items each year. But right now, because we've been in deficit spending, it seems kind of crazy to just set money aside for those items when we are having trouble just making our own payments to get through the year. So we took out one of those major expenditures. It was about about $140,000. That was savings for this Vactor truck that I mentioned earlier, kind of a big vacuum truck. The second big change that we made is that there were no figures in the budget that was printed in February in the annual report to take into account that we will have to begin paying the debt for the new water tower on the east side of town starting this summer. I'm pleased to report that that water tower is going very well, and we expect that we will be able to bring it online by midsummer. But that means that we will also have to go out and take out the obligation that the voters approved several years ago, a bond, in order to pay our portion of that bill. The total cost on that project will be about $5 million, and the City of Newport's obligation in that is close to $3 million. So we'll have to borrow $3 million and begin making payments on that for next year. And so we have included the debt service in fiscal year 25-26 now in this budget. The third area is that we have the option of including up to a 15% charge of our total expense to put aside, in addition to our total expense, to put aside for future capital expenditures. We looked at trying to do the full 15% because we know we have some big things coming down the road. Finally decided we could simply not afford to pass that kind of expense along to our ratepayers this year. So we settled on 5% increase, and that will put aside in the neighborhood of $130,000 next year, about $80,000 on the sewer side and $50,000 on the water side for future capital expenditures. So we passed that entire budget. If you put the two together, it comes out to right around $2.8 million for water and sewer budgets for next year. I'll just pause there and take a deep breath, because that's the challenge that we've had before us. We've known that we have to make some really hard decisions, and we are aware that this creates a real challenge for folks in Newport who have been accustomed to not having to bear the burden of the full cost of running the program for our water and sewer bills. So I'll just say that we are aware that those challenges are out there for members of the community. The other thing that it doesn't deal with is the accumulated debt that came from running a deficit operation for so long. And we do not yet have the exact number about what that deficit is at the moment. There is a clear line in the audited report from last June 30th of 2024, the end of our last fiscal year. There's a line on the balance sheet in the water and sewer operation that says due to others. This means basically money that has been borrowed from somewhere else in order to keep the system alive and floating. And that line, as of June 30th of last year, had an amount of $1.715 million in it, which is to say the operations budget of the city had covered that amount on behalf of water and sewer. I'm sure that if we looked at that today, it would have several $100,000 more in it from the operation this last year. So that would bring us probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million. But there are a variety of places where the deficit has been created, and it doesn't all belong to just one thing. It doesn't even all belong just in water and sewer, I suspect. But we have not yet gone deep enough to know exactly what the total accumulated debt is and the best way to go about trying to dig ourselves out from that. So in order to look at that situation, the Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices team has been hard at work as well. And they will be working over the next month to determine the best way forward. It almost certainly will include asking voters for permission to borrow some more money in order to stabilize our cash position and make sure that we have enough cash on hand to operate the city effectively. But we're not ready to talk about those things yet. I suspect that we'll be having some of that conversation in a few weeks at City Council meeting. However, the Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices team did come to Council last night with some initial recommendations. Their first recommendation is that we deepen our relationship with NEMRIC, which is our software system that manages the financial operations for the city of Newport. NEMRIC stands for the New England Municipal Resource Center, and it is used by nearly 100% of municipalities across the state. Most of those municipalities are operating in NEMRIC's in the cloud system. They log on and access information about their system through NEMRIC's provision of those services online. City of Newport still today has an in-house system working off our own servers. And the system that we are using was designed in 1996. So we've been operating for nearly 30 years with a general ledger and a series of reports that have been in place for all of that time. And so one of our primary concerns from the Task Force on Financial Reporting and Fiscal Practices is to make sure that we modernize and make more understandable our current general ledger and all of the reports that NEMRIC will be able to generate for us about our financial activity. In order to do that, we had to do two things. The first is we agreed last night as a council that we will move to NEMRIC Online. That will do several things for us, but the most important of them is that it will make the information available to the staff at NEMRIC. And the second thing that we're recommending, and that the council voted on last night, is that we will contract with NEMRIC for, at least initially, 96 hours of their time to act as a consultant providing financial systems advice to the city of Newport about the best way to organize our general ledger going forward and the best way to get the reports out of that general ledger that we need. Those things will begin immediately. I signed 2 contracts with NEMRIC this morning and sent them off, and we will be beginning to do the migration to the cloud probably by tomorrow afternoon, Friday afternoon, the 2nd of May. Those were the initial recommendations, but the Phase 2 recommendations from that group, from the finance team, are that they will come back to us with some specific ideas about how to manage the deficit that we currently have, the accumulated deficit that we have, in the most effective and appropriate way. And so I expect that we will have some conversation about that this coming Monday, but mostly at our second meeting in May on the 19th, the council, I expect, will have to make some decisions about the best way to move forward. If we choose, or if we recommend as a council to the community that we take on more debt in order to manage that accumulated deficit, we will need to come to the voters to ask for your permission to do so. We can't make a decision as council about long-term debt without voter approval. So we will be coming back to the voters to have more conversation and more deliberation about this together if and when that becomes necessary and when we have enough information to provide good information to the voters. So I do want to appreciate the remarkable level of effort and energy and expertise that has been brought to bear by the members of these 2 task forces. On the finance team, that's included Carter Finnegan, whom I've already mentioned, Hal Rodenberg, who is a recent arrival and is a resident of Newport who has extensive finance background, Lori Grimm, who's an 18-year resident in Newport and also has a great deal of experience with finance, Susie Small, who does personal financial planning and has been living in Newport for several years, and Travis Gaines, who is the director of the United Christian Academy here in town and has been here several years. And they have been staffed with a great deal of assistance from Jim Johnson, our treasurer and clerk for the city of Newport, and his staff. And then on the water and sewer side, I want to mention that working with John Manette, our council member, we have Carl King, who many people in this community know, Paul Tice, who spent 28 years working for the Champlain Water District and finished as their assistant general manager, brings a high level of expertise to this conversation. Jennifer Hopkins, who was on the water task force that existed several years ago and who has a great deal of knowledge, institutional knowledge, that we have depended heavily on as we've worked on these spreadsheets. And finally, Patrick Hurley, who is an engineer, environmental engineer in our community, and who has a remarkable head for detail and spreadsheet management. They have been staffed by Tom Bernier, the Director of Public Works. So that team has put in, they're not countless, but significant hours over the last 6 weeks, and they deserve our great admiration and appreciation for all their effort, and the council thanked them for that last night. That's it for this week. I apologize for those of you who are not wonky, but it seems important to make sure that we provide the clearest possible explanation we can, and I look forward to coming back when we have more information to share. Have a good week.